Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
So, guys, as always, want to thank you for your support on YouTube with memberships and our Patreons. We couldn't do it without you guys.
Yes, a huge thank you to A Patriots and Big Mike. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much. Again, we can't do it without help. It takes a lot of help to keep all this rolling. Absolutely revolting that the IRS bleeds honest, hardworking Americans dry while our tax dollars are handed out to fraudsters and people here illegally. The system is rigged to punish hardworking folks and reward the scammers. Enough is enough. It's time to dismantle the IRS and end state-sponsored theft. I completely agree. One thing that sticks out from my childhood is the fact that I didn't see my dad a lot growing up because he was always working. He was working in a factory job. He was working 50 hours plus a week. He worked on Saturdays too. In fact, he worked until he died at 75. He never really got to retire. And literally he was working in gas stations and grocery stores in his senior years. Never made more than $20,000 in his life. And yet the IRS was always coming after him and my mother. It's just really weird and feels like they were very targeted. Again, people that never really had anything, never bought a house in their entire life because they had a son that was diagnosed with a brain tumor at 5 years old and died at 16. And, that was my older brother. And the medical bills just made it so they were always struggling their entire lives. And then you get the parasites at the IRS going after little people like that. This is just absolutely blatantly disgusting. We watched this on double speed. It's MTG talking to somebody that worked for the IRS all the way back in the 90s. Former IRS agent, and literally he says, as so many others have said, you are not legally required to pay. Literally, it has to do with what is truly income and called income. Again, the IRS, 1913, it was put in as a temporary measure. We know the system creates problems. They create wars. They get us in debt in wars. Now the system themselves, they get rich off wars. They're bringing us into another war scenario right now to bring us to abject poverty and slavery while they're going to get even richer. They want to control every aspect of your life. They want to tell you even when to die, literally. It's ridiculous. Now they have the whole euthanasia thing going on in certain countries, pushing it so that if people are mentally depressed, you can just end your life. This really has to stop. I mean, why the heck aren't people waking up more? They should be enraged. This is another person that says 97% of Americans are not legally required to pay federal income tax. He hasn't filed in 30 years. The IRS never put him in prison. Now, this gentleman was harassed by the IRS. After he worked for the IRS, he left it. They came after him time and time again because he realized they weren't literally following any of the rules they're supposed to. They were simply making themselves richer. It's a club. It is a club. So he was harassed by the IRS for many, many years. But he still hasn't paid taxes in a long time. And if MTG's doing it, this is something that somebody big wants to get out there. Because, again, I view MTG as controlled opposition, and who's controlling it? Again, ultimately, when you look at the top of the heap, you're not talking about us. This whole system was brought in when the Sumerian city-states started to pop up over there in the Fertile Crescent. This is completely what we would call an Anunnakian system. Again, there's Hawaiian legends that say these reptilian beings came from the sky, and there was no concept of ownership of land with the indigenous people. And they, these beings, these reptilian beings that came and landed and took over, They gave us a monetary system. They gave us laws. They brought in religions. It's all just a method of control. Here's another former IRS agent explains why income tax is voluntary and, if enforced, is technically illegal. But we know these governments are all doing illegal things all day long. They are just crime syndicates. They are completely 100% no different from mafia or from drug cartels. They are not getting the brunt of the legal system because they bought out the judges. Everything is bought and paid for. So again, be a sheep no more. No, the sheep are being led to the cliff, and they're just falling off. They've fallen off all their lives. They haven't woke up to what is going on, the bigger scheme of things.
Well, I mean, it's very difficult thing. We know people have gotten in a lot of trouble for doing just this. If I keep seeing and I keep hearing, oh, you don't have to pay taxes. Yet what I've seen in my own life are people getting in a lot of trouble and losing everything. So what are we supposed to think? Is this something they're putting out there to try to get people to test the system, and then then they find the rebels who are testing the system and get them all tied up financially and knots so they can no longer do anything? I don't know. To me, it feels like if you're a lawyer working for the IRS and you want to do this, then you have the resources to push back. But I don't know what to tell people. It's just the information is becoming overwhelming. What's the end goal? I think the end goal is to drop the system and put in something, probably even, the new boss, same as the old boss, but going to be more strict.
Something's changing. They're bringing about a new system. We understand that, and yeah, we have two friends that had a lot compared to many people, relatively speaking, and they understood this. They read the laws, and so they didn't file. And yeah, they were harassed, and yeah, they're still going through legal problems. And in the case of one of them, literally had property seized by the IRS. And taken from them, never got it back, had to sell pretty much everything they own, and to this day hasn't been able to buy another house, many years later. So this is a very dangerous thing. I mean, we have paid our taxes, and at the same time, our income is, I don't try to make as much money as possible. It's just not in my mind to make as much money as possible because, again, I understand the system is corrupt and it's perfectly evil. And I do think that in our time here, contrary to what they want, I do think they are envisioning a greater amount of control, but I think they're going to lose a huge part of the population. A huge part of the population is not going to go along with it. And in fact, in every prophecy, what ends up happening is a revolution. It's a global revolution, and it starts in different places at different times. They understand this, so they're trying to install alternatives in that will look acceptable. How do they bait us in? Again, it's when the whip doesn't work, you're going to have to use candy, and they will go that route. But we can see what's happening right now with 47's regime. They started to give us some real health changes that many were demanding, and then they go off and start a atrocious war. So again, there they are. Okay, we're gonna not go after you for this anymore. We're not gonna force you to do that. We're gonna make healthier food for people, less toxic food. They start that ball rolling, and then they go and start a war somewhere else to, again, take from others and enrich themselves. It is the whole entirety of the system is really illegal. They never, they don't go and follow their own laws. They believe that when you're in the club, you're above the laws. You make the laws, you don't follow them. We know from the E-Files that's the case, whether it's Republican or Democrat. We need to think in more terms of, an anarchy, so to speak. One of the definitions of anarchy, which is how I view it, is literally there's just no central governing control. Government, literally broken down, means mind control. Govern, to control, meant mental and mind. So it literally is a form of mind control. They tell us to do one thing, but they never are going to do it themselves. They get out of paying taxes. They end up taking our tax money and doing atrocious things with it. Things that we don't want to do with our energy, because they're literally taking our energy and doing atrocities with it. So it's a tough place. It really is going to take the entire world to wake up, come together, and to shed the system. But that's going to happen in small pockets at first. Some places you could see they're enacting so much more of an Orwellian type of system and just taking more and more. Other places, there's resistance building. I think there will be free spots, and I think there's going to be absolute abject tyranny. It's going to be like Hunger Games in some areas and maybe a little Mad Max-ish in others. But we will not find answers within the system. It's the entirety of the system that must go.
You know, it's going to take some people to help other people free them so that, you know, they can continue to empower more and more and more. This is going to take a minute. There's no quick fix. It's definitely, you know, how long has the system been broken? How many years? Well, you know, you can take at least half that to revise the system, and hopefully it's something that we want. Hopefully it won't be taken over again by a different faction. But I think back and I think, well, that's going to create the split because some people just don't want to do what the controllers have planned.
No, absolutely. So, you know, it's fraying and it's disintegrating. We have to be careful not to be caught up in another big, illusion. And they're going to be offering us one illusion after another to try to give us the incentive to hand away our power. What we have to do is basically come together. The more people unify, the more people resist and recognize that, hey, I don't think I want to be ruled by organized crime. Your government, wherever you are, is organized crime. It doesn't matter what country you're in. It's organized crime. They are all guilty in this age, in this era, of looking out for themselves. Yeah, some worse than others. But in entirety, we have to think of a new way of thinking and viewing things. One that's totally different from everything we've been handed, whether it's capitalist, communist, socialist, fascist, whatever. All of them got to go. We need something, a system of no system. Break it down into smaller pieces. Let people that are of like mind come together and figure out how to handle things themselves.
Indeed.
Source bless and namaste.
Namaste.